question and answer at the end. So would you please help me welcome Blake Iverson?
Good thing I wore a tie, I usually don't.
I don't even think that's gonna help that thing.
Yeah, well, you know. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. Who hates lawyers? You know, it's a cheap start, but you know. All right, well, thank you so much for letting me come and speak to you tonight. I tend to keep things really, really informal. If you have questions, please, feel free to shout them out rather than wait till the end when you may have forgotten or we may have touched on things not as well as you would have liked. So please interrupt me at any time. I count on it. So who has their work on the internet? It's about half. Who has sold a piece of their work?
On the internet?
No, just
Oh.
Okay. All right, who has sold their work on the internet? This is just the workout routine portion of the show. And everybody stand up and right leg in. All right, so who's had a bad experience with that? Anyone? Had a bad experience with having things?
Yeah, someone just tried to scam me.
What happened?
I called the FBI.
Wow, bring in the big guns.
There were triggers, after about the 5th email, I had enough triggers that I called the FBI and says, this is scam, and they said, yes.
Yeah.
It's a scam.
Yeah, there's a lot of scams out there. If I might, will you guys indulge a story?
Of course.
This is a story that I think it's one of my favorite stories. As an attorney, it's been one of my favorite little successes. A client of mine is a painter. He does abstracts, and he had produced this painting, and he shows around town, makes a living at it, but not it's not a zillionaire. I believe that's a technical term. And he sold a painting for like $1,500. Not a bad. Everybody would be happy to sell a painting for $1,500, right?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. He sells it to a gentleman in Kansas. A year goes by, and the gentleman in Kansas calls and says, well, what the heck is my painting doing on this commercial? Client says, I have no idea. What commercial? Goes on the YouTube, finds the commercial. Well, I'll be darned. The scene of the commercial, it's a nighttime scene in a bedroom. There's a painting on the wall, and the wall splits open right down the middle of the painting, and somebody walks in with magical contact lenses. So the painting's featured fairly prominently in the commercial. So he comes in and it says, what happened? And I say, I have no idea. Painting's sitting on this gentleman's wall in Kansas. The artist is in Minneapolis. It's a pharmaceutical company. The commercials for a pharmaceutical company that's based in Atlanta. And so I send them a nasty letter saying, you stole my client's painting, pay us a lot of money. I get a letter from a mom and pop attorney in North Carolina, and I'm like, these can't be the attorneys for this massive multinational pharmaceutical company. And they say, well, we're looking into it, we'll get back to you. And then a couple weeks go by, and I get a phone call from a lawyer in Beverly Hills. All right, well, this is more what I was thinking. And he's from Duluth, so he wants to talk about Minnesota. So I let him talk for a while, build a good rapport. And he says, well, you kind of got us here. This commercial was produced in Argentina with, we didn't want to use union people, so we did it outside the country. There was an Argentinian art director who produced the painting. So I well, thank you very much. We'll, let me know. We'll come up with some resolution. So I have my client. Anybody ever done Google Analytics on their own webpage? Yeah. It's a really smart thing to do. You can see who's looking at your stuff in the world, in the country, in the state, how many times. And funny, we found out the month that that commercial was filmed, somebody in Argentina had been on my client's website and had basically recreated his painting and used it on this commercial. Thought, well, what, you know, this is not a well-known artist. How is he ever going to find out? And but for the owner of the painting, seeing that this thing looked a lot like his painting, well, you know, maybe they would have gotten away with it. So I mentioned that he sold the painting for $1,500, right? How much more than that do you think we got from that?
Yeah.
Sometimes getting ripped off is the best thing that can happen. If you get ripped off by someone with deep pockets, like a multinational pharmaceutical company. Who pays too much for prescription drugs? You know, get a little comeuppance for them. But of course now it's going to be more for the prescription drugs because they took a chunk of change out of their pocket. But something like that, I mean, that's willful copyright infringement. Intentional and willful. And when you intentionally and willfully infringe someone's copyright, well, the copyright law gives you some really, some nice tools. C word, collage, because it is the single hardest question out there. Because people, and everyone hears these old wives' tales about, well, you can use a quarter of the image, you can use a 1 by 1 inch square of the image. There is no de minimis amount of something that you can use. So it is something to, technically you were supposed to, have a license for anything that you're using if it's recognizable. So really what collage, the value of collage is that it's transformative, right? You're taking existing things and you're making something new out of them. So a lot of times people will try and find things that don't still have intellectual property rights in them that belong to somebody. A defunct company, for instance. Who knows what happened to their stuff when they went out of business? Anyone remember Look magazine?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's out of print, right? They don't make it anymore. So if you were to take something that was in Look magazine, probably a photograph that was in there was something that they had acquired. They probably bought the rights from the artist, or from the photographer, from the model, if there's a model, anything like that. So what happened to those rights? I don't know the answer. Probably somebody owns them. But who they are and whether they know they own them, I was thinking it's kind of like a food chain. And somewhere at the top of the food chain back in the olden days was like Time Life. And they probably owned a lot of stuff. And there's probably, the Time Warner, AOL Time Warner, whatever it is today, probably has a warehouse full of the stuff that they have the rights to that they don't know they have the rights to. So is it going to be a problem for you? 99% of the time, no. Yeah.
Okay, so in a magazine, like Look or any other magazine, they always have a little blurb in there that all of the material in there is copyrighted.
Yep.
Who owns that copyright? The magazine or each particular?
That's great. It's a great question. I have no idea. Don't have. Really great question. Someone owns it for some period of time, but it's a work for hire, so it is in a corporation, not in an individual. So it's not the life plus 70, it's a fixed term of years. And I can't remember if it's 90 years from creation. It's changed over time, but it's usually in that range. I just can't remember what it is currently.
I was just gonna say, isn't it copyrighted in the format that it's presented in? It has the magazine, but the photographer that took the picture copyrighted the picture himself, but the whole format?
Usually
of the
not.
magazine?
Usually not. Usually the pictures that are in a magazine are going to be works for hire. So let's talk a little. Everybody know what works for hire are? Well, let's talk a little bit about works for hire.
Then it would be the same with the ad designer then, right?
Right. Yep, that's almost all work for hire stuff. So the designer has no rights. Their client has the rights. So who else done commission pieces here? So when you do a commission piece for somebody, does anyone reserve any rights in their commission work? Do you? What do you reserve in it? What do you? Excuse me, what rights do you reserve?
I just say that I have the right to the image,
To what?
to the image that I create.
Well, that they can't
What else do I need to do?
Well, this is an important,
I say that they cannot reproduce or
Can't reproduce, right.
reprint my image without my permission.
Right.
Okay. So basically what you've done is, I mean, you've got the best of both worlds. Because really, they've said, here, we'll give you some money to create this. You create this, and you're like, oh, I own it.
Right.
You can license it from me further. Yeah.
But does that need to be in writing?
Yep.
Does there have to be some
That's part of the
contract
agreement.
between?
Mm-hmm.
When I've done some corporate paintings, and they indicate that they would like to use it conceivably on cards, advertising, website, or whatever, I have, given them permission at a price to use that.
So,
And
I
it's
mean,
usually about the same price as the original piece.
so you just make it
So I
twice the
just
money.
double it.
Yeah, sure.
And then you get free advertising.
Well, and it depends. I mean, the most typical work for hire is I create something, and Frank wants to use it for something, and he puts his name on it. He's purchased all the rights from me. I might not even have the right to attribution from it. I always put it when my clients, I work with a lot of ad agencies who are doing work for hire for companies. They work for Campbell Soup, they create some advertising for Campbell Soup, and the artist never gets any recognition. What I usually put into those contracts is to say that the artist has the right, the creator, the ad agency in that case, has the right of attribution. And they have the right to put it in their portfolio. So even if you create something for a company and they have all ownership, you can still say, here's an example of my work. Whether on your website or in a physical portfolio. Yeah.
Does that mean you can put it in your resume and say where
Yep.
which corporation owns
Yep.
it?
So I want to back this up.
Yeah, please.
Let's say I painted a picture and I'm working for a company who does painting parties.
Mhm.
And that person is going to take my painting and they're going to use my painting to have students paint that image.
Yep.
They're getting money from each student.
Mhm.
I've already sold my painting.
Yep.
Should I be getting more money as residual for that?
All right, so on the first day of law school, they tell you that the answer to every question is what? Any idea? It depends.
I thought you were going to say it's okay.
No, it's never okay. It always depends.
Yeah, okay.
But it depends what the contract says. If they, it's, in that case, it's probably presumed that they're doing it. Does that mean you're getting a bad deal by giving them that? If they're making, I have this happen a lot. People say, well, I signed away the rights to this thing, but they're making millions of dollars off of it. Well, yeah, of course they are. They're trying to, they bought it with the idea of maximizing the revenue that they would be able to make off of it. So, so you can't fault them. You only learn, and next time you know to charge more because your work can drive that kind of value.
But are they making money off of your painting, or are they just using it as a teaching tool?
They're using it as a image to copy. That's what they're doing.
Rather than having a copyrighted image that they can't have people make copies
Yeah,
of.
they wanted to buy the rights of my copyright,
Mm-hmm.
and I said no.
Yep. So you just gave them a license instead?
Right.
Yep.
Basically.
So a license, so when you're licensing for something like that, I just helping somebody out right now who's got one where it's like a piece of software, and she just said, look, I just want $1 for every person who uses it. I mean, that's what the license is. Great. That's definitely something you can do. So, like your bargaining power, you having an established career as an artist and being able to say, well, my stuff is better for this than other people's stuff is, gives you more power. But there's at some point they're going to say, well, somebody else will give us an image for.
Well, there's that time frame.
Yeah.
Where you're gonna make whatever.
Yeah. So you just have, so you're always trying to get the best deal for yourself, And, you know, the question you want to always be thinking about is what won't they say no to? You know, because what you don't want is, and who cares if they say no, what you don't want them to do is say no and hang up on you. Because it can be a negotiation. Oh, you want my work? It's $1 million. Well, we'll give you $12. Well, then we got some room to wiggle. You know?
That's a lot of wiggle.
Yeah. Another stupid story. It has nothing to do with art, but we had, so we refer to ourselves, my law partner, my law firm, and myself, as you know, we're lawyers for creatives. That's what we do. And we refer to lawyers. Our office is above the Red Stag restaurant in Northeast. It's we have an art gallery in the office. It's, you know, a really fun, funky space. But we occasionally tangle with these lawyers that we call tall building lawyers. You know, we're on the second floor, but if you're above the 40th floor, you're a tall building lawyer. And so we had to sue on somebody's rights were infringed upon, and we called and we had sued them for about $200,000. And this attorney who was 1 year out of law school called me, and he's works at this giant law firm, and he says, well, yeah, well, we're pushing this on a settlement track, so why don't you just make me an offer? And I said, you've got it. It's our complaint. It says $200,000. No, but make me another offer. Well, I'm not going to negotiate against myself. Why would I do that?
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, and he's like, okay, I'll make you an offer, $1,000. I was like, and okay, so this guy's getting paid hourly, right? And he's trying to explain to me that when you're a lawyer, you've got a dicker. Well, I don't have to dicker. You know, I'm here to represent my client, to represent their interests. So, and he's like, no, but we just go back and I say this and then you say that. And he's like, and I was like, well, thank you for the primer on that. But I don't do business that way. It's not in my client's interest to do business that way. So, you know, put yourself in that situation on either side. You know, when you have the power, you can drive up the price and you can get better terms. You know, you might think, well, I'll license this to them for a year because in a year I want it back and I'll have more power. But if they have success with it, they're gonna want to license it again and they're gonna pay more for it. So, you know, so that's something to be mindful of. On the other hand, you know, if you have a limited shelf life in what you're doing, let's say, you know, I mentioned that there are no image rights in somebody who dies. Well, who famous has died recently? Kennedy, 50 years ago tomorrow. Very recent. But that's a great example because if you are selling Kennedy paintings this weekend at an art fair, they'll probably move, right? People are thinking about it. When the Pope changes, you know, like the deceased Pope, not this latest Pope because he just retired. That doesn't happen. But before that, you know, but when a famous person dies, when Princess Diana died, that's a great example of people went out of the woodwork doing, you know, making art, and that art sold like hotcakes. But a year after she died, the value of that art crashed because there was a lot of it, and it wasn't new and noteworthy, right? So if you have something with a limited shelf life, you're going to want to think about, you know, about that and try and get all your money up front because there might not be money. All right, I believe I missed a hand while I was